Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Friends. This is our first episode. I'm trying a new format here. I'm Bobtheorc. I'll be your host. And tonight we are going to be talking about telemedicine with Dr. Nicholas Mezitis. Dr. Nicholas Mezitis is the clinical professor of specialty medicine at Ohio University. He's also the president of Mezitis Educational Research LLC, and he directs the diabetes endocrinology programs in two major health systems. So this guy's got a lot of experience, and we're going to talk about telemedicine. Dr. Mezitis, you're live. Let's have a good conversation.
Well, Mark, I'd like to greet our audience this evening. And you picked a very interesting topic, actually, the topic of telemedicine, because I think it's the new modality of delivering healthcare now, which is going to become ever more popular as we go forward. And that's for a variety of reasons I think we'll discuss
Yeah.
in our conversation today. But maybe we should define the term. And so telemedicine kind of describes the all of the ways that a doctor and a patient can use technology to communicate, and they can communicate without being in the same room, obviously, so they can be at different locations in different cities in different states. They could be across the world for that matter, time zones permitting. And there we would use, it could be a phone call between the two parties, it could be a video chat, it could be email for that matter, or text messages. All of these are modalities that are captured by the term telemedicine. And there are other terms that have been used. I mean, you might hear the term telehealth, you might hear the term digital medicine, or e-health, or m-health, which is mobile health. So those
Right.
are all terms that kind of deal with the same thing. And all you need is, in essence, to have access to the internet, hopefully good access to internet,
Yeah.
because the information transfer, requires a good connection, a phone or smartphone, PC or laptop. So obviously, if you don't have internet, you could also be on the phone, and we frequently do those types of chats with patients. And some of the older patients who are not as comfortable or as familiar with PCs and laptops and smartphones, a regular phone call would also be possible. Um, and as you can understand, it's very helpful because it services people in rural areas where there's a distance issue. Remember also that not everyone has the luxury of going 10 minutes across town, to visit the physician. They may need to travel 30 or 40 miles also to get specialty care.
Right.
So delivering this type of expertise, or making it accessible is very important for patients. And not only for patients, but many times physicians want to reach out to a colleague, send information to get an opinion, from a specialist. So again, that distance issue is addressed. Many times people have limited mobility. We have a lot of our senior citizens who have to get around with wheelchairs. They need special transportation. They may not be driving. And again, there you have the ability to be sitting in your living room, with the setup that's familiar and comfortable for you, and you can reach your doctor and have follow up in a comfortable way.
Right.
Other
Right.
people may be traveling, right, Mark? I mean, they may be on their way to some other location. They may find themselves at a vacation spot, and they're not necessarily comfortable with trying to figure out a local consultant, so they'll reach out to their own physician, and then arrangements can be made with their own physician to have a setup or to have the opportunity for local care. And I've recently had an opportunity in a setting like that where a patient of mine who resides in Florida, he was traveling, he was in Nevada. He called me. He had an issue. He needed some care. I gave him some instructions. I also made certain arrangements so that he could meet with local healthcare personnel. And obviously, things were expedited and went more smoothly because it's different to go in with an introduction from a physician as opposed to walking in as an unknown into a new setting and trying to establish a whole
Right.
set of.
Especially when you have their full medical history, and the hospital they're going into may not.
Exactly right. And so they wouldn't be familiar. It would take time and who knows exactly how it would happen. Plus, you may not be meeting the most experienced person. That arrangement would be made by your physician. And other people, of course, they may, for a variety of reasons, not be available or not be permitted to get into a setting with other patients because they're limited, because they may be uh, being under observation for a fever or something. So again, they can easily access their physician, gives them peace of mind. They get instructions. They don't feel cut off. So that's, I think, a lot of the benefits, how it helps us, and the various opportunities that it opens up. And then there are options within the scheme because one of the nice things now that's offered through the various hospital systems is you have your virtual chart. So whatever takes place with the physician, and that would also apply to your visit to the physician in their office. There's a chart which is generated. It's an electronic chart. Your x-rays are there, your cardiograms are there, the notes are scanned and placed in the chart. And with the new guidelines, you have full access to that record. So you have a patient portal, and there you can post messages in secure fashion because it's protected so that confidential information is not, you know,
Were
readily
were there
accessible.
were there a lot more limitations in the past? I know that with the whole recent situation, telemedicine's been expanding. So is telemedicine relatively new for you, or have you been doing? Because you've done some phone consultations, or at least given some advice in the past, but it's really expanded recently. How's it changed due to the virus,
Well,
and what are the
yeah, exactly. I think this new pandemic, if you will, that recently had to be confronted, it also generated opportunities for telemedicine, which existed, as you said, and which many of us had the opportunity to interact with patients, give them advice over the phone, and so on. This was not officially recognized by insurance companies because remember, they're the driver in this third party payer system
right?
of what flies and what doesn't. So obviously, physicians wouldn't be as comfortable spending a lot of time on the phone for services that wouldn't be compensated. And the pressure would be to have the physician meet with the patient in the office setting where it's kind of officially recognized and where the insurance company would reimburse for services. And that would also apply, for prescriptions or whatever the case may be. Now, in the new era, it became acceptable out of necessity to offer these services to people who were not permitted or were not able to get around and to go to, or they didn't want to go to offices because they were very concerned about being exposed. They were in high risk groups, older people. So the opportunity for them to have care readily accessible was important because people have chronic problems. They can't wait for 6 months for one problem to be dealt with so that they can go back to do what they had to do. I mean, it was bad enough that elective procedures had to be postponed so that beds in the hospital were not occupied, that might be needed for other
Right,
reasons.
right.
So, yeah, so all of this created a thrust that brought telemedicine to the foreground, and the insurance companies accepted it. And as a matter of fact, pay scales were set up so that if you were meeting with a patient, as we are speaking now in a video conference
Mm.
with an image, that would be pretty much reimbursed like a regular in office visit. So that would be a full payment,
Okay.
which, which was a significant incentive. If you're meeting with a patient on the telephone without an image, because for whatever reasons people didn't have access to the internet, then that would be reimbursed as a lesser charge. But again, there was a reimbursement and an incentive so that that could proceed. And it made it simpler, for all the parties involved. Now, taking this a step further, even before this telemedicine now took off for the everyday visit, we had the opportunity where x-rays, for example, were being communicated through the internet, and they were read in Australia or they were read in India because physicians local there, had the opportunity in different time zones to be reading the x-rays that were taken in emergency rooms in the United States overnight, late, or whatever. And then the interpretations were transmitted again by email. You had those readings. So you could have the consultants and specialists, they could be anywhere.
Right.
And you could send images and films and so on to be read. So that was already
So
happening.
so what you're saying
And
is that if somebody got hurt in the middle of the night, instead of calling in a doctor to go look at the X-rays, they could send the X-rays to a doctor that was awake because Australia'd be daytime, and they could just and they're already there on duty.
exactly. And they were reading these. And so in the morning, all the files were ready and prepared. As the new group came in, everything was read. So you had this opportunity. And as another example, intensive care units that require special care, it requires special physician specialists, people who are called intensivists. So at one of our hospitals, we have nurses, staff, in the intensive care unit with certain beds. And then with direct observation, we have the intensivists in a major city who are sitting and who are reviewing and can respond immediately and give instructions to nurses as they monitor through their cameras the cardiograms and the imaging and everything else that takes place. So one intensivist in one location can be supervising one or two or three intensive care units with specialized personnel locally who can accept instructions, and you don't need that. And that, of course, is a cost factor, aside from the fact that you don't have this talent, readily available in large numbers. And we knew it also from the military, because that goes back in even decades at this point, where in theaters of war and conflict, many of our military who were injured were transported to aircraft carriers where you had full teams, hospitals set up, and those hospitals again were linked in with major hospitals in the United States where you had specialist cardiac surgeons, neurosurgeons or whatever, who could even perform procedures robotically,
Right, right.
remotely on the aircraft carrier. So all of that, those are dimensions, and it usually happens that the military is way ahead of things in terms of technology, the same way that the internet was developed. And then subsequently, these technologies and approaches are popularized in the general civilian sphere as circumstances,
Well,
force us to.
and I would imagine that in the military, they'll find out very quickly what works and what doesn't work, and you probably don't have the same level of liability. If there's a soldier in the battlefield and you're just trying to save them any way you can, if it doesn't work, I would imagine there's not the same liability as if you're trying something experimental
Well,
in a
yeah, but
civilian hospital.
you're right. But also it underscores the fact that you can have these specialists because the military can't uh, financially engage, all of these very powerful specialists who are at academic centers and so on. But they can call on their expertise and they can have them participate, and they do now. For example, they'll refer out patients from the VA to civilian physicians with specific questions and indications for consultation.
Right.
And well, in this setting that we were describing, you would have the patients in an operating theater, and you would get the best person who would be there to supervise and even perform procedures, as I said, with the robotic technology. Now you can do that, it permits it. And that is obviously huge. I think we're going to see more of that. Right now, telemedicine is primarily driven as a medical visit where we're talking like we are talking now, and then a prescription is written and so on. But looking on in the future, as technology is progressing and this virtual theater becomes, as you know, from gaming, it becomes almost a reality, an alternate reality, even three-dimensional for that matter.
Well,
Uh,
you could probably do something eventually with like VR goggles and robotic technology where you're 3,000
exactly,
miles away and you can look around and see everything and
exactly,
control
exactly. And I
the
think that's
operating
happening
rooms.
already in certain theaters, so to speak. But technology will make such things more readily available, pretty much like it's done with other things too, right? I mean, infrared cameras, this, that, the other, they've become now almost commonplace. Aside from that, people also, have queries. They access the internet. There's a lot going on, and very frequently I get questions almost every day that are sent to me through certain professional websites where they call on my services, and they'll put out a question. They say, "You have a question. My husband has diabetes. What should I be concerned about the children? What type of testing should I do?" So we would respond to these queries, and that's a very simple form of teleconsulting, if you will. And of course, then you take it a step further. There are developing countries where physicians may be in the field. Again, they can reach out very simply and have the expertise of the biggest centers,
Right.
you know,
Well,
in a remote.
well, I remember. Oh, this is probably 8 years ago or so. It was a number of years ago. I remember I was backpacking in the mountains in Greece, and I hurt myself, but it wasn't very bad. Just up here
Mhm.
in my shoulder, and I remember taking a picture of it and and emailing it to you so you could take a look. And you told me, yeah, it's not that bad. Just be careful with it, and I'll see you when you get back to New York. And just having that kind of confidence because I wouldn't have I'm not very good at speaking Greek, so I wouldn't have wanted to try and deal with a Greek medical facility. And so just having that initial opinion really put me at ease, even though I was on the other side
Absolutely,
of
and
the
that's a
planet.
very good example of what we're talking about. And also, should it be necessary for you to access the, let's say in this case, Greek medical system, the physician could put
You
a
could
call
you yeah
through,
you could put the call through and
speak
get it
with
all set
people
up
there,
for
right?
me.
So they're there waiting for you. They know exactly what to expect. There'll be English speaking staff, that you would interact with. And it's a different handoff, so to speak.
Right, right.
And of course, they take special care because they know that this is, uh, part of a referral system, which is important. Now, all of this, of course, takes place with informed consent because it's a medical visit. So there are rules and regulations that define the storage of this type of information, the access to images, and all of the confidentiality that takes
Right.
place. So we preface all of these visits with a statement that says during this was a telemedicine visit, and I was located in my office at this location. The patient was located in their home. They were advised of the limitations and the rules governing this type of an encounter and its confidentiality. And the patient who was identified with their name and their birth date and so on and so forth, however they were identified, agrees. And so that's important because if the patient doesn't agree, then you can't really, generate an encounter. And prescriptions are written online. That we've been doing for a long while, and now, of course, it takes it a step further. So prescriptions are written, and these could be communicated, to the state where you happen to be. So we may be in Ohio, you happen to be in Florida. We'll just put it out to the local pharmacy, and you have the exact continuity of whatever is necessary.
Right, right.
But yeah, that also brings up questions of licensing and regulatory issues because there are 50 states, obviously, and 50 states have 50 different regulations about their
So
approvals and licensing and such.
now, didn't they ease all those licensing restrictions once when the pandemic hit? They didn't. My understanding is that if you were licensed to practice in one state, you were good for any state. But I don't understand the licensing. So why don't you
Yeah,
talk
I
about the
think,
licensing and then some of the limitations of
right.
telemedicine?
So that's important because technically, in order to practice medicine across state lines, so to speak, you need to be licensed in those states where you would be practicing, quotes. Uh, Now, as you said, the pandemic kind of eased things up a little bit. And that's an area now because of the growth of this particular modality of delivering care. This is now being revisited. And I think they haven't yet fully clarified all of the guidelines as we transition,
Yeah, but they
into
can't put the
post.
genie back in the bottle, though. I think
No,
telemedicine's here
they
to
can't.
stay.
Yeah. And
It's
I
just too
think that even
convenient.
exactly. Even though people would like to go to the previous model where they say, well, now we're no longer going to be reimbursing for visits, either they come to the office or it wouldn't work. I think that's not going to be an option. So they'll have to come to terms. I'm talking about the insurers and
Well, and,
be
and,
very
and from my perspective, the biggest problem I have if I'm hurt or sick, the last thing I want to do is leave my house if I'm feeling miserable. I just want to make a phone call, see somebody, and be done.
correct.
Uh, and so this, yeah, so that makes it a lot easier. So
Yeah.
what kind of limitations are there to telemedicine? Obviously, we don't have the technology to do everything yet.
Well,
Where do you find that problem?
that's a very good question, Mark. I mean, it depends on the setting. In other words, if you're in a telemedicine setting where you happen to be in a doctor's office in your hometown, where there's a nurse, they're set up with the camera equipment, that's required for telemedicine, and I've had that opportunity too. So the location had a nurse. The nurse had a special stethoscope where, if she would position it where I instructed her, that that stethoscope transmitted sound through the internet so that I could listen to the heartbeat. If she puts in the position, I could hear that as if I was putting it there.
Oh,
So I
that's
could
cool.
listen to the heart. You see, she had an ophthalmoscope to look into the eyes. And as she positioned it and looked inside the eyes, I could get an image on my screen of the background of the eye so that I could make an opinion. I could tell her to put the otoscope, which looks into the ear, into the patient's ear, and then I would get a view of the inside of the ear. I could instruct her to examine the abdomen, to expose a certain body part so that I can look at it, a foot or whatever. She could feel for pulses. So that would take the interview a step further in that type of a setting, obviously with
And
good
would the
cameras.
nurse have to be specially trained in this kind of skill, or just a
Well,
regular nurse?
usually, yeah, usually uh, they're obviously skilled because of their licensing as nurses, but in addition to that, they've had some training to be familiar with the cameras and the equipment and how to
Right, right.
position, so
So
to
they do
speak.
have to be a little bit tech savvy. It's not idiot
A little
proof.
bit, yes.
Okay.
But then again, that became a capability of running an office at that location, and now some of the companies are looking into that, where they can set up these satellites, pretty much like we see these urgent care MD type of settings,
Right.
where you can go in, personnel is there, but you can have the expert consultant who's at a different location on the camera, like we're talking right now, guiding the examination and then giving information.
And that should
Uh,
reduce cost also because you don't need as many expert or one expert can help more, more facilities.
Precisely. And especially now, now that you're bringing it up, it is getting to be more difficult to get people with that level of expertise because the way the medical education system is set up in this country, it's quite expensive to complete a medical degree, even at the first level where you become a primary care physician. And we're talking several hundreds of thousands of dollars. And once you take it a step further into specialties, you're adding 3, 4, 5, 6 years of training. You're looking at a lot of money that is involved, so to speak. Now, obviously, people who specialize get reimbursed, for
Right,
services,
right.
but that doesn't really approximate what they would need to pay back loans and so on. So they really need to get out into the field and practice. So as a consequence, we have more and more specialists now that need to come in from other countries, or we need to send specialty work to other countries in order to get opinions. You know, it becomes by nature, a whole different ballgame. And as such, as you said, having telemedicine allows now one specialist who is based in location A to service 4 or 5 or 6 satellite locations.
Right, and each satellite location would have a primary care physician or
Right.
a team of nurse
Primary care staff, this and that.
practitioners or whatever.
Right. And then they could have the services. Now, I should also mention that no matter what we do with virtual, you really can't entirely replace the examination and the interaction that takes place when we're together in the same room and I have the ability to see you and examine you, in person. So certainly, if this is the first time that we're meeting the patient and we're establishing a relationship, I always make the effort to have the patient in the office so that we can have our first, or at least if it's not the first one, very soon thereafter, I try to make arrangements because only that gives you a fully complete picture. But as mentioned, The second best arrangement is what we discussed, where you have
Right.
their personnel locally, good cameras and everything else, and then you take it from there. If I do know the patient and we have a relationship, it's much easier for me to decide when and if they need to come in and how urgent that would be. So we have the option, and that's what we're doing right now. For some people, they're coming in. We may have 2 or 3 visits in person because there are new patients or they wanted to come in. And other people say, look, I'm not comfortable coming in, but I do want to have my visit and we'll do it on the telephone or in the video. So
So,
that just highlights the opportunities that, from the patient's point of view, are valuable.
so what kind of information can you gain from an in-person visit that is much more difficult to gain from a virtual visit?
Well, I mean,
Where the big
we're using all of the senses. So right now, when we're talking, I can see you and I can listen to you. So that's 2 of the senses that are engaged. But when you're here, I can smell you, I can touch you, I can feel the texture of your skin, you see. So all of that is engaged. I mean, all of our senses are engaged in that, with that opportunity. And for the skilled physician, where the physical examination is a very valuable tool, it's important, to have that opportunity to see certain things. Even the colors, for that matter, are different, when you're looking at someone. So um, that, in many ways, also reduces costs because if everything is done remotely, then I have to rely more on technology to get the full picture. I might want an X-ray. I might want, something else. Had you been here and I could, let's say, listen in, I might be more inclined to say, all right, I don't think we need the X-ray. I'm pretty comfortable with what I hear, or in seeing, or
right. Okay.
I saw the way you walk, and stuff like that. So I don't think that the physical examination should be sidelined. Unfortunately, these days, we're having more and more technology, let's say, entering the field, and less and less emphasis on the physical examination, and for that matter, even on the history taking, because even that is a skill set, interviewing the patient. It's like an interrogation in a way. You
What
get a
that
lot of information. And these little clues and hints that are so valuable in classical medicine now frequently get sidelined because technology is driving it, and there's a push. And you feel then at that point like a cog in the wheel. So I think that that's something which could be lost if we're not careful about how we use these tools. It can expand your capabilities, but it should be done, with care and the proper hands. It's very useful, like a computer for that matter, right? I mean, you can have so much to gain from the internet, from accessing it, the spell checks, all these features, but you do have to know where you draw the line and where cut and paste ends and the real interaction begins, right?
right.
Otherwise, it leads to.
Well, and I would think that getting back to patient history, I know that there are there are problems that you were able to solve with me because you knew me for most of my life, and some you'd given me some nutritional advice that that just a small change in my diet solved a major allergy problem that I'd been having for all through high school, and other just other little things. Just there's I guess there's a nuance that when you know somebody for a long period of time and when you see them in person over a long period of time, that you can I bet you get kind of a sixth sense of when something's wrong and when things are okay.
And that's very true, because even though we think that we've advanced a lot in the classic model, in the small town and so on, the doctor was, like you say, part of the family. I mean, he knew the family, he knew the details. It was like the cop on the beat.
Right.
Definitely knew his group, he knew the community, and he didn't really even rely, like the London Bobbies, on having a weapon or something with him because he knew his group, he knew the community. He was able to diffuse a lot of the situations and problems without escalation. So this is something similar here. You know the patient, you know the family. Um, you're able to make these decisions, I guess, in a more comfortable fashion. And the other thing that we like to emphasize is that the concept of the attending physician, that was the way we trained anyway, where you had your physician. The physician also joined you when you were hospitalized. He would come in and visit with you. He would direct the care both in the office and in the hospital. And now, that's been lost a little bit, along with a lot of this technology and electronic health records and so on. The concept of the attending physician is kind of fading. And you have a physician who's outside practicing in the office, and when you're in the hospital, they are hospitalists who are physicians, who are employed specifically to take care of people in hospital, and then they
But
don't see
they don't
them.
have the same bedside manner or empathy or connection.
Right, and it's a kind of hit and miss. Some people are excellent. Some people may not be up to the par that the patient is comfortable with, but that's what you get.
Right.
So um, there's something which is lost in the process. And that's what I'm saying. It's nice to be able to have these techniques and technology which would help in a situation like what you described, where you know your physician and you have ready access to them and you're able to reach them, you call them, you text them, whatever. And it's different where you become just another person coming in as a client on addressing a type of call center, so to speak.
So it almost sounds like where the biggest benefit of telemedicine is uh, kind of like where where it was with me when I went off to college. I had my local doctor, but I'd still call you first, and you'd give me advice. Or when I was traveling, or now that we have all this technology, I don't have to. I just we just get on and on video or whatever to
Exactly.
take care of things. And so I guess the advantage is you could have an attending physician with you all through your life and your travels, and have the same physician, for many years. And that almost seems like a better, bigger benefit than just having. I mean, I guess having a specialist available in case of trouble is good, but having that connection, that care, having somebody who has your back, even if you're in a different location, is nice. So I don't think so. It sounds like
Absolutely.
telemedicine's never going to fully replace traditional care.
It'll enhance it. It'll
Okay,
enhance it. It's like, you go onto a website and they'll give you instructions so that you can make your own recipe, so to speak. But it's not going to replace the experience of going to the restaurant where you sit down and the chef serves you a nice meal, on a special occasion. So I think you need both, right? Because there are times when you don't really want to go anywhere, but you just want to be able to put something together, and you do, and that's valuable. And also, speaking of the fact when I was practicing in Manhattan, where I directed Clinical Consultant Services International, another group that I led, and there we would have patients from all over the world that wanted expertise from physicians in the United States, accessing, sending through medical records, slides from pathology, x-rays, films, and so on. And then we were able to interact, consult with other physicians locally and give an opinion and guide care, at a distant location. So as you said, I mean, I've been in this particular field now, having worked with the electronic health records for over 20 years, probably longer than that, as I think about it, at a time when this was a very small piece and people were still using paper records.
right,
Uh, and that gave me the familiarity. I mean, I've seen the evolution of this technology, and I think that now one of the silver linings in all of this health crisis that we've been living through is the fact that the technologies that we have, the smartphones, the beautiful screens, all of this high resolution imagery is now being utilized and accepted as a way of delivering healthcare at the discretion of the patient and their physician,
right.
you see, without the limits of, hey, you can do whatever you feel like, but we're not going to pay for it.
Well, it seems like it's certainly accelerating the acceptance of modern technology, and that's certainly going to be a benefit. So where do you see things going over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Where's telemedicine going to? Where are we going to end up? Is there a limit that we're going to
I
hit?
think I don't really see limits as such. The limits are what technology imposes because, if we're able to, it's like that beam me up, Scotty. So, I mean, if they're able now to, like they did with gaming, they're making games that are more and more and more realistic to the point where you wear some type of helmet, right? And the helmet with the imagery that it permits, has you almost even providing tactile sensations. And all of that we're describing, I mean, it's really, um, I guess,
So
in some ways,
you could conceivably have a glove that the nurse could wear that could touch the patient. You're wearing a glove
correct,
on your end, and it could
correct.
transmit tactile sensations to your hand. And
Yes.
we're maybe what 5 years out from that, maybe 10 tops.
And I'm sure that technology does exist. And as I said, many times the military has technology and modalities, that they make available later for commercial purposes, but it was already in place. I mean, the GPS system, satellites, all of these things, they are at least 10 to 15 years ahead of
Right,
anything
right.
that we subsequently, adopt in the commercial sphere. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I think this is great. This is something which is moving ahead. And we saw it in other venues, right? I mean, I would right now have three bookcases behind me with books and things that I would refer to and magazines and so on and so forth. And now basically I have everything accessible through my laptops. I mean, it's nice to have the books there, but they're, in a way,
Well,
they've been superseded. I mean, they're decorative, they're interesting. Sometimes you really want the paper in hand to kind of go through it, but everything is right there now on the screen, and actually with imagery and things that you can't really, links to videos and all sorts of stuff that you can't put into a textbook, you see.
yeah.
So I
Well,
think, and we're doing that now, bear in mind also with education. So this telemedicine, you give it another component, and the education of the physicians now is happening in that fashion, right? They have virtual patients. they Then we grade them, we monitor them by video, so we watch the whole interaction. It's on tape. We can play it back. We can freeze the frame. We can watch it again, and look at more detail. And the same thing happens, with a televisit, right? Because it's there, it's stored. It could be reviewed, and looked at again.
and so if the
So
patient says something that maybe you missed the first time, you can just rewind and
you
listen
could
again.
rewind it,
Yeah.
listen again. Let me hear, what did they say that exactly? So very valuable, very valuable techniques and technologies. And then again, you can also communicate things to the patient. You'll give them, let's say, material. So you can say, all right, I want you to review this, and you just get it as an attachment. I would like you to take a look at this video, which is going to talk to you a little bit about the diet for people who have gout. And there are certain foods, that you should be avoiding. Here's this link. You can review it. So two-way education. And in my specialty, remember, I do a lot of diabetes and I do endocrinology. And in diabetes, you've really seen this explosion. I mean, it kind of was the tip of the spear, because in diabetes now we have people wearing pumps. They're wearing monitors that track their blood glucose,
Right.
throughout the course of the day, every minute. So all of this technology generates graphics, uh, and just like with cardiology. And so we're tracking these graphics. We're looking at blood work. We're um, deciding on insulin delivery and giving instructions, to the insulin pumps. So all of this makes this very sophisticated setting possible. And I just got an email yesterday through LinkedIn from one of my former patients who's telling me about how she's enthused because this woman, she's had diabetes, I think, for over 40 years. I mean, she grew up with it at a time when they were boiling syringes and needles, and now she's wearing a pump. She's wearing a glucose monitor. The pump is talking to the monitor. She can't believe how well her sugars are being regulated. So um,
And if there's a
that
problem, you can remote in and real time adjust stuff, I bet.
and you can do that as well. I think pretty soon. Yeah, there are certain limitations because people have concerns about, hacking and
Right, you don't want
private.
some hacker to go and just insulin spike somebody and kill them.
That's right. That's right. But yes, exactly right. I mean, all of that, as we do with cardiac monitors, and so this is phenomenal. I mean, medicine, by definition, I mean, you have to be conversant and comfortable with technology in order to function these days, certainly in our particular medical setting.
Right.
Now, you know,
Well, and when it comes to these kinds of devices, you could probably have a secure computer at home or their cell phone, and they could, if an adjustment needs to be made, they could always just plug it into their cell phone, give you a connection, so you could make the adjustments. Then they disconnect it, and that way it's offline and secure again. You could do something like that with technology, I'd imagine.
that's correct. I mean, all of that, right? And you can also see the imagery. You can they can download and show you their profiles. You can point things out, as you know. You can circle things. You can highlight it. So um, there's tons and tons of applications, and new ones are coming out every day, right?
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how you're going to interpret the data, how you want to visualize it. And I think it's good because it permits behavior modification too, right? As you get this type of feedback from the technology, it allows you to change behaviors, to make changes, to kind of feel more in control of what's going on. So that I think is valuable. And as I said, for education, the young physicians, they can access a wealth of data. Um, it just places demands, because it sounds like it's simple, but it does take more time for you to structure a meaningful education session through the computer using these various technologies. And the same thing with the patient. You really have to know what you're doing because you're a little bit more limited in everything that you see, hear, and smell. And as I said, so you have to be careful that you don't kind of overextend your capabilities because I've seen that happen too, right? There's a temptation for people to cut and paste and kind of put two things together and just send it through. But that doesn't, that could lead to problems.
So how has this affected your vacation time? Because I would imagine that with telemedicine, if you're if you're off duty, if you're at home, or if you're uh, visiting family or whatnot, and there's an emergency, you could probably connect with your cell phone, with your smartphone, or you probably take your laptop with you, and so even if you're not at the office, you could be available in a pinch. Does that have any
That's
sort of
exactly right. So, like you brought up a good example. So, in my preference, the patients that I follow, normally when you leave and you're out, let's say for an extended period of time, vacation or something, then you would pass off the responsibility to one of the other physicians to answer their questions and deal with their lab results that come through and so on. But the way things are now, the lab results, and every day um, I have at least 60 messages, updates, results in my box that I have to look through independently. Even if nobody shows up, that box is constantly being populated like an email box
right?
with information and things that you want to look through. That's not easy for someone who doesn't know the patient to be able to go through and make decisions without knowing the patient. It's really difficult. They can, in a pinch, see the patient if they come in and they have a sore throat or something, but that's different from making decisions about details, questions, and so on and so forth. So anyway, my preference is I go through my own box wherever I am. I can access my patients, and I can spend a half an hour and just go through, give instructions to staff who are local, and they know how to respond. And yes, I'm not seeing patients in the office during that period, but I like to maintain that continuity.
Right.
So and of course patients also have access, or at least when I was in my private practice, they had access to my phone, the cell phone, so that they have peace of mind. Like you said, you can reach me if something is really an urgent matter. Most people know that if it's something which can wait, they don't really have to disturb, let's say, uh, just for nothing. But I found that it was not a problem. It really solved a lot of issues and gave people the peace of mind, and it gave me a better control of the situation. So it depends on the physician and how they want to use the tools. But yes, I mean, it can put demands. You have to know how to harness it, right? Because
Yeah.
like anything else, I mean, it could become a 24/7 thing. So you don't want that to be the case. Uh,
Well, I know it. I know at my office with some of the IT stuff that we do. I have my staff that handles most everything on a day by day basis. But there was I was in London a couple years ago, and there was even though I had my staff, I'd still remote into the corporate servers that this various servers that we were managing, and I'd still double check everything every night, just as a double check. And at one point I'd preemptively noticed a problem where I was then able that one of my staff wouldn't have noticed necessarily, and I was able to send them out and sort of proactively take care of a problem before it became an emergency. So yeah, so having that kind of remote access, because we've been doing a lot of remote stuff in the IT industry for I don't know, like 20 years. As long as I've been in business, basically, we started doing that. Some of the biggest projects I've worked on, people didn't realize that I was camping in the middle of nowhere and was using my cellular hotspot to remote in and do my part of the project while I was camping in on some mountaintop. And I would imagine that we're at the stage where you can do that with the medical profession as well. Now that we have good internet.
that's exactly right. And you can have that level of support. You can have that level of support with like you just said, in your case, I mean, you were servicing their PCs. People can share a screen with you. You can guide them
Yep.
through the PC, right? To make certain changes. I mean, I even changed a hard drive in one case, when somebody was guiding me and they showed me and pointed out what I had to screw out and what I had to put in. So uh, that's something analogous to what we're talking about here. Exactly right. I mean, we took our cues from the information technology industry, and now it's come to healthcare. You know,
Now, do you
the
find
only
that you're
difference.
having to learn a lot of technology in order? What kind of additional education are you needing in order to perform these kinds of services in a healthcare environment, or is everything pretty straightforward that you don't need a lot of advanced technical training?
No, you do need to get an expertise also because remember we're dealing with electronic health records. These electronic health records are like learning a language. They have all of their cues and prompts. They have ways in which information is stored, what you need to access, when you want to look at medications and how you respond to a cue query. So you have to learn it. It's almost like a language, and then the hospital changes to another electronic health record. You got to learn a different type of language, if you will. In addition to that, now you've got this doxy. You got to link up to that. Maybe you want to access, the doxy on your phone. Now that they call that haiku, it's a different type of connection that you need if you're going to put it on your mobile. So you have to be comfortable and to learn these particular techniques and be familiar with the technology. Obviously, you can't be as experienced as the IT person, so we have IT people that support us.
Right, but if you're smart enough to learn how to be a doctor, you're smart enough to learn how to use some of
Yes,
these some of
yes,
these
yes.
apps. So
It's just a question, of the time element, but you learn on the job, so to speak, as you move ahead. And IT, fortunately, is there so that we can call up and say, look, hey, I have a problem. Good. What computer are you on? Give me the number. They link in, uh, they troubleshoot. We go on to the next level.
well,
And
and
then,
a lot of these IT people, a lot of these hospital technology staff, they specialize in medical technology. Whereas like with my business, we're more of a general practitioner, operation, and then we specialize in data recovery and certain data elements. But we generally stay out of the medical. We don't do a lot with the medical other than maybe we'll be a subcontractor in a project because that seems very specialized in how they do things.
yeah, and as you said, I mean, right now, let's say you're coming in and you would set up the hardware that's required
Right,
based
right.
on what their needs are. Once the hardware is set up, a different team comes in, like we had that happen, and they're software specialists, so they don't know much about the hardware, and they wouldn't know how to hook up our phone, let's say, so that it can accept an XYZ application. But once the application is on, they showed us how we go through the steps to register the patient, to put them in, to put the file, the medications, to delete, add, and so on and so forth. So they complement each other.
Right.
Uh,
It
yeah, and
sounds
that's a
sounds
whole
like
spectrum.
yeah. It sounds one of the common things we do is we'll set companies up with QuickBooks, I haven't used QuickBooks since 1997. I have no idea how to use QuickBooks. I can do the basics. I can set it up, make sure they can access their data. But as far
Right.
as all the complicated accounting stuff, then they usually have some QuickBooks specialist who sets up their business and sets up all their all the inside. All I know how to
Right.
do is set up the
And you
accounts
need
and
that.
back up their data, right? Because there's no
And you
reason
need
for
that.
me to know how to balance the balance the books in QuickBooks. That's what
And
accountants
even
are
at the
for.
hospital now, we have, let's say, we use a system for dictation called Dragon.
Right.
And that system for dictation, the Dragon, there are various versions. So the professional version, again, has various versions. And the one we use for internal medicine has the vocabulary and everything else that we need. But the hospital has a Dragon specialist. So they just specialize in the technology that relates to the Dragon, the same way they have IT people that specialize in the electronic health record that we're using. You know,
And all
it's
this
just
technology can be managed remotely also. So if you need to dictate something and you're not at the office, uh,
right.
or the patient's not, all this stuff, it seems that with internet speeds now, it doesn't really matter where anybody's located.
Exactly right. Yeah. So that's the gist of it, and I think, and I'm looking ahead now to even more advanced. I mean, I've seen quite a bit, as I said, from the paper record all the way through now to what we're witnessing currently, and I'm very happy to see that it's reached this point. I just am trying to direct the attention of the physicians who are training our students and so on. I want them to understand that you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Right,
We want
right.
to make sure that we maintain our skill set. You should be able to be in an environment where you have none of this, right? The cash registers are down, it's knocked out, but you can still give change on a $10 bill. You're not going to sit there frozen because, hey, my spell check is out and all of this is out. So what are we supposed to do now? You know, you need to have the skill set to be able to function in that environment with your stethoscope, your fingers, your nose, your ears, your eyes, and default to plan B.
Okay.
You're saying.
It almost seems like we could probably, and I don't want to go too down the rabbit hole, but because it almost seems like we could do. Probably need to have a follow-up video just on medical education
Yes,
in the modern era, as well as another video on the technology and just because this one I'm trying to focus more on the
right. This is the
relevancy of the
telemedicine.
telemedicine
But
part.
we can certainly do one where we discuss the applications of telemedicine, let's say in a specialty, like my specialty of diabetes.
Right.
And we can talk also, like you said, about the medical education and how it's changed in the past 10 years, past 5 years.
Has
And,
has a lot has a lot changed in the last few years? I would imagine
oh,
that
for sure,
because
for sure.
medical technology's changed a lot as well. Just
The way they teach it. I mean, the whole thing has been revamped. The curriculum has been revamped, um, and at the same time, you know, bringing all this technology. I mean, the students now, of course, are very familiar. They come in with a different level of confidence and familiarity with computers, and unfortunately, a lot of the physicians who are very experienced, but they can't relate to all of this technology. I mean, it becomes a burden on them. They just retire, and in a way, you lose the expertise, that pool of knowledge that's, as I was saying earlier, quite valuable. You need to get both. I don't think it's sufficient to, just be like I was saying with the cash register. It's great to know how to use it, but when you don't have a cash register, you should be able to use the abacus.
right, right. So it seems to me that the increasing acceptance of telemedicine probably is a net benefit overall to medical experience. It's just that we have to be cautious not to overly rely on it. Is your
Correct,
message? Okay.
correct, correct. Or at least you have to be prepared. So as I tell my patients, and we'll talk about that in the future, you're using an insulin pump, for example, which has capabilities, autopilot, smartphone style. You do a lot of things, but they're always trained in plan B. In the event that the thing doesn't work or we have doubts about its function, you take it off, you go back to your needle and syringe, and you know exactly what to do to maintain control of the situation until such a time when the techs and the doctors figure out what's wrong with your equipment. You can't afford to be stuck and say, geez, man, my pump wasn't working and I ended up in the emergency room. So we don't want that. And it happens also with us, right? I mean, the computers are down. The system was down. The servers were down. So what are we going to do? I'm always prepared with a paper record. I go in and I keep on seeing my patients. I'm not going to call it a day. Everybody has to go home because the computers are down.
Right,
I
right.
just revert to the other system, the paper and pencil. When the computers come back up, I'll have to sit down and kind of enter some of this information into the proper record the way it's intended. But we're not going to stop.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the mindset.
All right. Well,
Okay,
do you have any closing thoughts?
I'm like I said, very optimistic, very pleased to see that we've come now to the acceptance of telemedicine and the effort that it requires, so that the patients are confident that they can access their physician this way, and the physicians are comfortable that it's part of their practice and it's not a money losing proposition to spend time with people on the phone or on the video. Um, so that's been very helpful. It also opens, as I mentioned, very many vistas with transmitting education and information in a variety of ways. But we temper that, right?
Yep.
Reminding people that there are certain basic skills and certain Hippocratic approaches to medicine that are timeless. And you need to know them and you need to be comfortable with them so that you don't miss out on what medicine is all about.
Right, right. Use the telemedicine as an extra tool in the toolkit, but don't use it as a
Right.
crutch.
It's a tool. Exactly right. Uh, so, and if I have the tool, it's great. I mean, it really helps me. But hey, I didn't have the stethoscope with me, but I can still have other ways of getting to what I need to do
Okay.
for you.
Well, cool.
Okay.
Well, thanks a lot, Dr. Mezitis. I guess let's go ahead and wrap it up here. I'm gonna do a little bit of a closing, but I think this is a good first. This is sort of a good first run for my conversation with friends series, and I really
Yes.
appreciate you being my first victim. I mean, my first interviewee, and and if people like what I'm doing, then we'll get some more
You get
interesting
followers.
people on. Yeah, we'll get more interesting people on. We'll have some more interesting conversations, and I'm going to bring you back a few more times because I want to
Sure.
talk about medical
Absolutely.
technology and medical education, and also some of the
Yeah.
health and nutrition stuff. There's some health and nutrition advice that you gave me
Sure.
back
We have the
just
book
after
that we
college.
can
Yeah,
refer to, which is
yeah,
there.
and then
And
made some
yeah,
big
absolutely.
changes in my life. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap
Okay.
this up. I hope everybody had a good time with
Good.
what we're doing. If you like this video, please share it with your friends. That really helps. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the notifications, and then down below in the description, I'm going to have all of Dr. Mezitis' information, so that if you want to look into what he's doing and reach out to him, then you'll be able to do so. So thank you very much, and good night.